You have Nick's number, right? So if I just text him a YouTube URL, we can.
For my messages?
Yeah.
Because none of my contacts are saved on my computer, so I can do it from here though. If you send it to me, I can send it to him. Also, speaking of, we should probably turn off my message notification.
That's fine. They won't show up. All right, so we are live on YouTube, and
You want me to text him?
just tell me what his number is.
You're not muted.
We will be muted in just a second.
After I introduce you guys. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, Vicky sent you a link. Let's load that. Tell me when you're live, and Andrew will get us started.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Andrew Whiteley here, Executive Director of the party. We're making it work. Thunderstorms can't stop us and knocking out internet. Speaking of which, by the way, I know that all three of these ladies have been fighting really hard to expand access to broadband. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to U.S. Senator Tim Kane's state director, who also managed his campaign in 2018, and I'm sure had a very close working relationship with the three congresswomen that are here. So Corinne, I will let you take the floor and take it away.
That's awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And it is a pleasure to be here. It really is just an honor to moderate this panel of just wonderful elected officials, wonderful women, and really, truly wonderful friends. Once you've been on the campaign trail, fighting in the trenches, you become friends. As Andrew said, I'm Corinne Charles Dungo. I had the pleasure of managing Senator Tim Kane's re-election campaign in 2018. And in that assignment, I had 3 goals that he gave me. 1, re-elect him decisively. But number 2 was to lead a coordinated effort in order to flip House seats. And then number 3 was to train the next generation of campaign operatives. So in my capacity of campaign manager, I had the opportunity to work with Representative Loria, Representative Wexton, and Representative Abigail Spanberger with their teams, with them showing up on the campaign trail. And the thing that I remember about all of you is that each of you had such a great story, and you delivered that story to your voters, and that is what connected people to you. But now we're in 2020 and things have changed from 2018. But I do believe that the thing that stays the same is being able to connect with voters one way or the other and sharing what you've accomplished. So how do you now envision doing that during a pandemic, during a quarantine of staying at home, during the fight for racial justice and equality, and everything else that's going on? And I open the floor to you. And why don't we go with Representative Loria, start with you, to just talk about how do you connect, how do you do what we did in 2018, which is getting your message to voters with everything that's going on in 2020.
Well, first I want to say thank you so much, Corinne, for hosting and moderating this. And it was great working with you last cycle. And this is certainly not going to be the same campaign that we ran last time. First of all, our names don't rhyme. So it was Kane and Elaine. That worked out really well. We had the big Kane and Elaine signs, and our committees put yard signs together like that. So I can't figure out a way to make it rhyme with Mark Warner, but we'll still run a good coordinated campaign. But we had some great rallies. We had a huge rally on the Eastern Shore in Northampton County, another big one in Virginia Beach. And, just Senator Kane was, all over the Commonwealth and all over the 2nd District. And we had the opportunity to run together. We are going to run together this time with Senator Warner and Vice President Biden at the top of the ticket, but it's going to be a little bit harder in the environment where we can't go face to face with people in the same way. We're certainly opening up the Commonwealth. We're going into phase 2, soon into phase 3, but the volunteers who we are reactivating, we're getting them energized. Everyone has different concerns about their health and when they'll feel comfortable coming together in larger groups. So to a large extent, we're going to have to play some of that by ear as to when it's safe and when people who want to be in the campaign feel engaged in the campaign feel safe, kind of coming back out. But we're not waiting for that time. We're using a lot of digital tools. We're already phone banking. We're reactivating volunteers. We've been doing community check-in calls for months. We've reactivated and gained a lot of new volunteers. And we're using a lot of really creative tools that have been used successfully in other campaigns to reach people digitally through social media. We have online ambassadors who promote our social media content. And we have the relational texting tools that we have the opportunity to work with. And I think that everything we do right now to build in our digital world will truly augment those traditional campaign activities as we get into the fall and it's safer to do those. So I'll stop there. I'm sure Abigail and Jennifer have a lot of other great things that they're doing, and we'd love to hear from them and share some of those ideas too that they're doing.
Yeah, Representative Spanberger, I mean, share with us, because I remember with your district, the contention of, is it going to be purple? Is it going to flip? Is it going to stay red? But your consistency in showing up to voters who didn't traditionally seem like they were the Democratic voter on paper. So how are you going to go about it this time around with so many other factors to think about?
Well, I think it starts with, what did we campaign on? And in 2018, I campaigned on being accessible, being focused on the mission of serving the community that elected me, focused on healthcare, focused on the priorities that matter to people on the ground. And so I think the first element is getting out and being able to communicate. And that's where, to your question, all this is different, communicating that I've been working on all of the things I said I was going to work on. I've been prioritizing all of the things that I said I would prioritize. And even in cases where I can't necessarily get out and go across our 10 counties and talk about those things in person, where I can be available virtually, where I can be present, where I can talk about the things that we've worked on, the things that we've achieved, what we've done for constituents. And I think a large element of this is the fact that, in a district like mine, part of what I was asking people to do is to believe in the political system again, and to think that their vote matters, because part of what we saw, there were just a lot of people who were saying, well, I don't know. If they were traditionally Democrats, they would say, I don't know, this is such a red district, what's the point? And we'd say, well, what if it's not? Take a chance. And we'd say to voters who maybe are more independent or historically had voted for the Republican Party, will listen to what I have to say. And so now it's about being able to kind of show up and talk about all of those things that we've been doing, which of course is so difficult in a pandemic. But I think what the three of us have all done is, from the day we were sworn in, we did all that. So the campaign season, as it were right now, is really an extension of the way we've been working as legislators and representatives. Our in-person town halls have now moved to be telephone town halls. And in fact, for me, I love in-person town halls. I love being able to talk directly to people and see people's faces. And I like to be accountable in that very direct way. But because of the pandemic, we've switched to telephone town halls. But we can be available and accessible to those who might have otherwise had to get a babysitter or drive across a county. So, even in this changing circumstance, I think we're seeing the bright spots. And if I can speak for my colleagues and friends, some of our focus has been, we went to Congress with ideas and things we were going to prioritize. And frankly, now more than ever, it's clear that politics is so important, because the policies that we are enacting and voting on and pursuing, and even the constituent services that we're delivering, matter. And they matter so deeply, particularly in the time of a pandemic and hard conversations about how to achieve equity and racial justice in our communities, and continuing to push and talk about those issues and be accessible, even if it's sometimes in a little bubble like Brady Bunch style.
Great. I mean, I know, Representative Wexton, that in your district, there are just so many different regions, there's rural, there's suburban, there's urban, there's different constituencies. How do you compare what you did in 2018 and how you're going to try to go about it in 2020 with just having such a vast district with so many voters and constituents that have different priorities?
Well, I hope that, well, first of all, Corinne, I just want to say that you and Tim Kaine spoiled us for coordinated campaigns forevermore, because it was fantastic running with you guys, with both of you. And even though we don't have Kaine and Elaine, we do have Wexton Warner. So
I'm
for all the
always left
Warren
out of
people-
these name things.
We'll get you in 2022, Abigail.
If you can find something that rhymes with Spanberger, I don't know.
But you know, my district goes from just outside of Washington D.C. all the way out to Frederick County, so it encompasses a very, very diverse bunch of areas. But I'm banking on the fact that all the hard work that I've put in since I was elected is going to pay off when it comes to the election. You know, one of the things that I'm most proud of was starting the Congressional Agritourism Caucus, on a bipartisan basis, to get more resources out to our agritourism community and businesses, which we have throughout Virginia 10 and throughout Virginia. And I've been very present in the district and working very hard in that. As far as elections are concerned, you know, we have the benefit in Virginia of having elections every year. So we have a bunch of really motivated activists who have been fighting this fight for such a long time. And, you know, Virginia gave the country hope in 2017. We did it again in 2018. We did it again in 2019. And now we need to put an exclamation point at the end of that sentence. So for us, we had our volunteers out collecting petition signatures to get me on the ballot. And we had to collect 1,000 signatures. We ended up collecting over 5,000. I felt terrible for Zach Perkowski when we handed him these giant stack of petitions to go through, but that's how engaged and involved people were. So that was Super Tuesday when we collected most of them. And then you know, COVID hit right after that. But we didn't shut down. You know, we kept our volunteers engaged. We did community phone banks where we would do neighbor to neighbor check-ins to find out how they were doing, to check in on one another, not to call necessarily for campaign purposes, but to find out, you know, how some of our seniors are doing, put them in touch with resources that they may need, and keep everybody engaged and involved. So just like Elaine and Abigail are doing, we're doing the same thing virtually and keeping everybody engaged.
Great. One thing that I remember the senator would say about all of you is that he had faith that you would deliver on your promises. And so one of the things that I'm so proud to be a Virginian and staying involved is because then I get to see the great work that all of you are doing in the House and delivering on some of the promises you made to your constituencies. But I realize that doesn't stop the Republicans from attacking you and from heavily focusing on each of your districts. What is it that you want your voters to know, even as Republicans are heavily attacking you, sometimes as individuals, sometimes as a collective group? What is a thing that you say that either motivates you or just gets your supporters or your voters just continue to stay focused on the goal at hand? And I'll start with you, Congresswoman Wexton.
Well, for me, it's just that I am who I am, you know, and I've been here for you, and I tell you what I'm going to do, and I go out and I do it. And for me, constituent services have been a huge, huge part of my work in Congress, because, you know, I'm very, very proud that my district staff has successfully closed over 2,000 cases and returned over $3 million to constituents. You know, we are open and accessible all the time. And, you know, I think that we have a lot of great accomplishments that we can look back on. I'm proud that my Retirement Savings Act got folded into CARES Act. I'm proud that we finally got paid parental leave for federal workers, something we've been working on for a long, long time. And, you know, I have always fought for federal workers. So we've got some really good legislative accomplishments that we can rely on. But basically, for me, it's that I'm a part of this community. I'm always going to be fighting for you. And I am who I say I am.
And Congresswoman Loria, your opponent is familiar to you. What's the pushback on when you're attacked, especially on the good work that you're delivering for the second district. What do you say? What is your strategy?
Yeah, well, he's not my opponent yet. They still have to do the primary on Tuesday. So stranger things have happened in this district. But
That's true.
if I were to run against him again, I went to Washington. I went to Washington to represent this community, and I truly feel like I am accessible. Like Jennifer said, I listen to everyone in the community. I mean, I've sat down with the Tea Party of Virginia Beach. I've sat down with all kinds of groups, and anyone who approaches us and wants to talk about how we can help. And I feel like, especially in my capacity on the committees where I serve, I've been able to have 4 pieces of legislation signed into law, so the third most of anyone in the House in this last Congress. And it has been focused on, getting veterans the benefits they deserve, getting additional funding to help the Chesapeake Bay. We got $85 million this year. That's $12 million over previous years. Helping Blue Water Navy veterans, so Vietnam era veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange and have never had VA healthcare before. We passed that legislation out of my subcommittee and into law after decades. We got tax relief for Gold Star families, so families who lost a family member in combat. And we're being overtaxed at 37% due to legislation that was passed by this administration in 2017. I mean, I found out about that problem because I sat down with a group of widows in Virginia Beach, and they explained to me what had happened, and their tax bills had gone up. And so we took that and we acted on it, and we delivered, for those many families across the country. And then also in the wake of the tragedy that we had in Virginia Beach with the shooting last year on May 31st, I was able to work with Senator Warner, and we were able to fix a problem with the Victims' Compensation Fund, where there would have been a tax penalty, both for people who had contributed to it, as well as people who, families who greatly needed those funds and benefited from it. So we did something similar to what was done after the tragedy at Virginia Tech, and we had that signed into law. And so, I mean, I've just really been trying to find problems and solve them, and, also really proud to be very bipartisan. I think all of us, talking to our colleagues from other states, realize that, the Virginia delegation is one of the few delegations that meets on a regular basis. At this point, it's every week, all 11 of us, plus both senators and the governor as well, and his administration to talk about the response to COVID. But we do this regularly on a monthly basis, and our chiefs on a monthly basis. So every other week, your full Virginia delegation is meeting on a bipartisan basis. And the fact that we can say that, like, I show up for those meetings and we actually find things where there's common ground. And Abigail and I are also members of other bipartisan caucuses, and, really trying to show that we represent everyone, and we're here to listen and to continue to serve. And so just like Jennifer, we've done a huge amount of constituent services. We're closing in on $3 million as well to recoup for constituents, Social Security, Medicare, VA benefits. And, we're here to help, we're here to listen, and we're here to solve problems for the community. And I think that being able to communicate that is the message that I think will show that we're starkly different from my former opponent, if he's my opponent again, who didn't do that, voted 90-something% of the time with Trump, and has the cloud of a petition forgery scandal and indictments and convictions within his former campaign staff. So I think we'll show night and day between what we've delivered and the type of person that I am. So.
Yeah, Congresswoman Spanberger, will you go with that thread, that bipartisan work, and how, particularly for your district, that's been important in just having a mindset to represent everyone? It's been really unfortunate on the federal level in the presidential in the White House that there isn't a mindset that the president represents everyone in the country. Will you talk a little bit about that and how important that is to you and to your district?
It is incredibly important to me to demonstrate that I will talk to anyone, listen to anyone, and work with anyone where I can find common ground. And I was just ranked by the Lugar Center, which is a nonpartisan organization, as the 5th most bipartisan Democrat in the 116th Congress. And that takes intentionality. It isn't, just that I fall in the middle. It's that they judge it based on what legislation you work on, who you work with, who co-sponsors your legislation, how much you co-sponsor folks from the other parties' legislation. And for me, it's incredibly important for 2 reasons. One, I believe that we make solid, strong, long-lasting policy when we bring together coalitions. And sometimes those coalitions are Democrats and Republicans. Sometimes those coalitions are different groups of Democrats who have different interests, Democrats who represent rural communities, Democrats who represent suburban or urban communities, or across the board, people from across the ideological spectrum. where we make good legislation, we are able to make it stronger and better when we build coalitions. And that takes time, and that takes, understanding what's important to people who may be on the other side of an issue or across the aisle. But I think so one, my desire to be bipartisan or build coalitions is earnest. I think that's how we make good policy, but also representing the district that I do. President Trump won this district by almost 7 points. So there's a lot of folks in this district who don't typically vote for Democrats, or at least not at the rate that, in some other places in Virginia or across the country. But it isn't so much about, whether or not they are a Democrat or they are a Republican. I represent everyone in this district, whether they voted for me or not, whether they were kind of like, she's okay. I had one person one time say, well, you're a funny Democrat, or you're kind of nice for a Democrat. And like, I'll take it. I'll happily sit there and explain why I believe what I believe, and talk to people in the, on the terms that matter to them. I've been invited to Tea Party meetings. I've gone to Tea Party meetings because it's important for two reasons. One, for me to be able to hear the questions that are asked of me, so I know what are on the minds of people who might not be ideologically aligned with me all the time, but also so that I can answer and people can hear from me. And, not necessarily because I'm going to convince anyone, but because I can be accountable and talk about the issues that are important. And I think one of the benefits of being in a toss-up district, or a district that doesn't typically vote for, if you're a Democrat, or if you're a Republican being in a district that might typically be a Democratic district, is I automatically, if I'm doing my job, am talking to people across the ideological spectrum. I am having people disagree with me. I am having people tell me why they think I'm wrong, tell me why they think I'm right, and everywhere in between. And so it constantly challenges me to say, how could this policy be better? Am I doing the best job possible? And that helps you serve a constituency better. And I frankly think that because I serve such a broad group of people, that allows me to then walk into the halls of Congress and go up to a broad group of people because, I've got dairy farmers in my district. I've got broadband issues. I've got, suburban communities. I have a little bit of everything in my district, and it allows me to find that teeny bit of commonality, which might ultimately become legislation. And so when you're looking at how do you make good policy, like I passed, and it was signed into law, legislation related to border security. And that was a piece of legislation I introduced with a Republican from Texas. We both have a background in the CIA. And so we said, okay, listen, we are used to dealing with issues focused on protecting our country. There's a lot of challenges at the southern border. How do we address it? And we hashed out a plan. And we were able to get that piece of legislation passed and signed into law. And, I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to do that. And I've done the same on some prescription drugs, not all of which has gotten a vote in the Senate yet. So
We're working on it.
some of it will become law eventually. But the legislation that I have passed into law, it's because I was able to bring together a coalition of people and say, like, this is what we're working on. Join us.
Great. I want to shift gears for a moment because it's not lost on me that we're on this panel together as women. And one thing I remember in 2018 is every time we showed up, every time I was in one of your districts with the senator, little girls would just be so enthralled with all of you and with me, and just having that connection and not even knowing that you're making this impact. So I just want to talk a little bit, just, shifting gears of how important has it been just to be women in Congress, on committees, doing this work and being an example particularly to all children, but particularly little girls as they look up to see what is possible in their future and fighting for their future. I have a 3.5-year-old now daughter, and I know how she's just already starting to think and putting things together. So I wanted just to pick your brain a little bit of how important that has been to you. And I want to start with you, Congresswoman Spanberger.
Well, I'll start by telling a little story. My middle daughter, who's now 9, when she was in pre-K, they gave her a ruler that had all the faces of the presidents on it. And this would have been before the 2016 election. or leading up to it, we were talking about it, because Clinton was a candidate at that point. And she looks at it, and it's the picture of all the men through Obama. And she looks at my husband and said, women aren't presidents, because she's looking at this little ruler that they had given her in class that didn't have any women on it. And she just said, women can't be presidents. And we said, actually, women can be presidents. We just haven't had one yet. And there's a woman who's running for president. She might be president. And we had that conversation. But I think that it's really important to recognize that if kids don't see things around them, they will assign certain rules of the road that they think exist. And so what I love about our freshman class, certainly my colleagues from the Commonwealth of Virginia, but beyond just us, we have the most diverse freshman class in congressional history. We have women, we have men, we have, people from across the country, different backgrounds. Everybody looks different. Everybody's from different places. And when school trips come through and they sit up in the gallery of the United States House of Representatives, when they look down predominantly at our side of the aisle, almost any kid can see somebody who they could be someday. They see women, they see Black women, they see Black men, they see Muslim women, they see, Hispanic men, they see young, old, everything. And I think that there's something really powerful in being able to recognize, well, if they can do it, then I could do it as well. And I'm sure the others have stories of their own where, kids will say to me, well, I want to go into politics. Well, I want to have your job someday. I'd like to be in Congress. And I think there's a level of accessibility that comes with seeing it that's really important. And Corinne, also for you, the position of campaign manager, which you previously were, or, covering the state on behalf of a senator who can't be everywhere at one time, you walk in with that role. You too are showing people, like little girls, little boys, she can do it, so can I.
Yeah. And Congresswoman Wexton, I know for me, it's, I'm conscious of it because I know that it's important to the next generation to be able to see women of color, just different people in a variety of roles. As you go around your district to the schools, talking to kids, what are some of the questions, or what is the feedback that you're getting that makes you feel like we have to continue to press for equality, for representation, for making sure our next generation has a sense of the possibilities for them is endless?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that when I was young, there were no members of Congress that looked like me. I mean, it was, and that's even when I went to the state Senate, when I was thinking about running for the state Senate in 2013, I went down there and I didn't see very many women, certainly no women with school age kids. So things have changed a lot in a very short amount of time in Virginia. But one of the things that was most inspiring to me when I was running is how many young women and girls would come up to me and say, this is so inspiring, we're so excited. And they came out and volunteered on the campaign, even though they weren't even old enough to vote yet. They were so excited about it. So it's great to just be a role model and just, show young girls and women what they can be. And for me, one of the funniest things is as a member who represents part of the DC media market, every time I get a lot of Don Byers Girl Scout troops that come, because when little Girl Scout and Brownie troops come and visit the Capitol from the close-in suburbs, they want, they come and they meet with me a lot of times, just even though I'm not their member of Congress, the moms and dads say, well, we want them to see a woman member of Congress. So that's fun. But it's not just for women, it's just the little things that you do to be an ally for so many groups. Mm-hmm. Like for me, on my first day in Congress, I hung the trans flag. Yeah. And for me, it was not a big deal. I have a trans family member and I wanted to show my support because they were under attack from the Trump administration. And I just thought, it was a nice gesture. Well, it blew up and it was a huge thing. And that's not why I did it, but it turned out the mail that I got, the people who came and took pictures of the flag and the touching notes I got from across the country, feeling like finally we have somebody who recognizes us. And then I met somebody who is in my district, whose daughter is in trans and in high school, and was so, had a picture of me and my flag in her room, because she felt like finally like that she was okay. So what we do as allies really makes a huge difference, and just being there for people and just being genuine and speaking up for those who may not be able to speak up for themselves makes a huge difference.
Great. And Congressman Loria, especially in this time frame that we find ourselves with so much protests for equality and pressing for justice, what do you think, what else could we be doing? What else can be done as we continue to lead by example, and as you continue to lead by example in your district of making sure that not just, little Black girls or Black boys or the Latina community, just everyone, and particularly the next generation, feels like their voice matters and they are represented by their country?
Well, I think that this is a very challenging time, and there are a lot of people who feel like their voices are not being heard, but people have taken to the streets in peaceful protests, and I think that we're at an inflection point in our country, where those voices are going to affect change. And looking at some of the legislation, the Justice and Policing Act, and many other things that we're working on, and reflect our values, as Democrats in the House. Can show that we are committed to helping affect that change. I think in a smaller, somewhat narrower way, but being a veteran and having served 20 years in the military myself, with Hampton Roads and the military presence we have here, 1 out of every 5 people in Hampton Roads is either active duty military, a veteran, or a family member thereof. And I think I have an opportunity and a responsibility, as a woman who served for 2 decades in the military, to really dig into those issues. We had a hearing in the Military Personnel Subcommittee last week about systemic racism in the military. We have continuous issues about the levels of sexual assault within our military. And I think, as women, having served in some roles that are generally not traditional, myself in the Navy, Abigail in the CIA, and then all 3 of us here are mothers, and we really look at this. 3 representatives and Karen as well. Like, all 4 of us are mothers. And, I think when we think about why we're doing this and why it's so important is, all we have to do is look at our children. My daughter Violet is about to turn 11. She's going into 6th grade, and that's an inflection point. She's just a year younger than Abigail's daughter, Claire. And, they go from being kids to kind of teenagers and seeing the world, and, the world I want her to see and know. I think it's very different than on the trajectory we're on right now. And, maybe wrap this all into like why we have so much important work to do this year. Abigail, Jennifer, and I think we've shown here tonight and through our work over the last, year and a half in office that we're working very hard for our communities. But, and, we have the majority in the House. There's so many things we can't get done. There's a stack of bills this high sitting over there on Mitch McConnell's desk in the Senate, things that reflect our values. And not only that, but, rather than having someone in the White House who unites people, we have someone who's just trying to tear it down, tear our country apart, and divide us. And this is truly, why we all need to work to have new leadership at the top. And, I know we're all working for our own reelection, but we're working for the whole ticket. We're working to get Joe Biden in the White House. We're working to send Senator Warner back, and also hopefully get a majority in the Senate so we can get some of these things done. And just thought that might be a segue into talking about, why this is such an important election, and we really are all working hard to make sure that the whole ticket, can reflect the values that we share here.
It is a good segue, and what I would say is, like, what advice, because really each of you represent a district that is that's competitive and that is replicated throughout the country. And Vice President Joe Biden and his team and his campaign is going to have to reach voters in districts that mirror your own. So I want to just give a moment of advice of what you would tell the Biden team of what to do or what not to do as they talk to voters across the nation that are in districts that look just like yours, diverse, different, economically, different in ways of life, looks different geographically. What is the advice that you would give in order to win and change the leadership on top? Because you all are correct. We really need a president that represents all of us and that has the values that will move us forward to the next generation. So Representative Wexton, I want to start with you. What advice would you give the Biden team?
I think that Joe Biden needs to appeal to a wide swath of voters, and he does that because everybody knows Joe and everybody loves Joe. And I think we need to let him show that empathy that is such a hallmark of his personality, because that's something that's been sorely lacking with the current administration. And I will tell you a little story about Super Tuesday here in Virginia. I spent some time at Langley Precinct in Great Falls. So if you don't know Langley Precinct, it's one of the most affluent precincts probably in Virginia. It's not usually real friendly to Democrats, but I hung out there for about an hour in the middle of the day. There was a steady stream of voters coming and going all day. And there was a volunteer there with the Biden campaign who had the shirt and the t-shirt and the hat and everything. And she came up to me at some point and said, I feel like I'm in a confessional because so many people keep coming up to me and saying, I'm a lifelong Republican. I have never voted in a Democratic primary in my life, but I cannot stomach the thought of 4 more years of Donald Trump. So I came out today to vote for Joe Biden. So, you know, we need to make sure there are enough of those people. And I think there are. I do think that even in those districts where Trump won in 2016, that a lot of people have buyer's remorse now and realize his true colors. And obviously when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. But now we've seen for 4 years, and I think enough people recognize with all the damage that's been done to our nation that we need to make a change. But I think that we need to let Biden be Biden.
Great. Congresswoman Spanberger, what do you think? Any advice?
My advice would be don't make any assumptions about any voter or any locality. Go everywhere as much as he's able or his team is able, and recognize that voters deserve to be heard. They deserve to be spoken to. They deserve to be listened to. And I think the act of earnestly engaging with people and hearing their story is foundational to strengthening our democracy. I believe it's foundational to ensuring that a candidate like Joe Biden will win the presidency. And I want to make sure that we don't, and as Democrats in Virginia, that we don't cast aside certain precincts or localities because they're not winnable. It's about more than a win strategy. It's about making people know that you care, and they may not vote for you, but at least they know that you care and that you showed up. And that person, that earnestness is what we need to put back in politics, because frankly, that's why people turn away from politics, because they don't think their voice matters, because so often people don't even try and listen to them. Or they jump ahead making assessments and assumptions and say, I've got all the answers because you live in this zip code, therefore you need this thing. And that's not what politics should be. And the more that we, I think, listen to people, don't make any assumptions, get out and talk and be earnest, the more we will win, which is a nice aspect of it. But honestly, the more we will strengthen the very foundation of our democracy, which I believe to be really facing some challenges, as so many people think that perhaps their voices don't matter.
Great. And Congresswoman Loria, what do you think?
Well, I actually came across this campaign poster for FDR from 1936, and it says, the man with a heart and the party with a soul. And, I think that is truly what we need to convey about Joe Biden. I mean, he's the man with a heart. And, like Abigail said, he's listening, he's connecting. And, the party with the soul, I think that, this country is just being ripped apart intentionally with divisiveness from the top. And I think that, just the message that he's here to bring people together, to heal this division, and to restore our place on the world stage, because we have shunned our allies. We've turned away from relationships that have kept us strong. And when it comes to defense and national security, I mean, that's very important here in Hampton Roads. And just knowing that there is someone who will show that strength of our country on the world stage, but will also, have a heart, for the people in our communities who are struggling, and will work across the aisle, and with everyone to try to find ways to make the future better for our children. And I just don't think that anyone sees any of that coming out of his opponent. And so I think that being able to show that message, and that, I think that most people truly, and I can say, in our area, Abigail would probably say the same thing, are just very much in the middle. They want to know that people can work together and can work across the aisle. So, focusing on the values that we share is going to be very important, more than a platform of policies that can just be picked apart by our critics. And so I think that is really what people are looking for in this election. So I hope that he'll be able to continue to communicate that.
Well, great. That's a really positive note for us to end on. I just want to take a moment just to say again that it has truly, truly been a pleasure to be with you guys tonight, but really since 2018, to be in the trenches, to fight together, to win together, but also to the work continues. You're continuing to deliver great promises. And I'm particularly proud because being on the campaign, watching the people you advocated for really deliver on what they said that they're going to do makes me feel good, because in Virginia, we go back every year and tell voters, this is what you need to do. So thank you once again for being the representatives that you are, the women that you are, the mothers that you are, and what you represent for Virginia. I'm really proud of all of you. And I am so glad I had this chance to have this dialogue with you tonight. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Corinne.
Thanks, Corinne.
Great to see you, Corinne.
Thank you.